guys, welcome back to Holes by Lewis Sachar. We are currently on chapter 17 on page 77 in my edition of the book. All right, so they are busy digging and digging and digging, obviously looking for more objects, maybe that are gold. What they found was gold, though Stanley didn't think it was real gold. Maybe more objects that have the initials KB on them. We're not sure. They weren't interested in Stanley's fish fossil, but this golden colored tube with the initials KB are very interesting to the warden. Chapter 17. For the next week and a half, the boys continued to dig in and around the area where X-Ray had supposedly found the gold tube. They widened X-Ray's hole as well as the holes Armpit and Squid had been digging until the fourth day, when all three holes met and formed one big hole. As the days wore on, the warden became less and less patient. She arrived later in the morning and left earlier in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the boys continued to dig later and later. "This is no bigger than it was when I left you yesterday," she said after arriving late one morning, well after sunrise. "What have you been doing down there?" "Nothing," said Squid. It was the wrong thing to say. At just that moment, Armpit was returning from a bathroom break. "How nice of you to join us," she said. "And what have you been doing?" "I had to, go." The warden jabbed at Armpit with her pitchfork, knocking him backward into the big hole. The pitchfork left 3 holes in the front of his shirt and 3 tiny spots of blood. "You're giving these boys too much water," the warden told Mr. Pendanski. They continued to dig until late afternoon, long after all the other groups had finished for the day. Stanley was down in the big hole, along with the other 6 boys. They had stopped using the wheelbarrows. He dug his shovel into the side of the hole. He scooped up some dirt and was raising it up to the surface when Zigzag's shovel caught him in the side of the head. He collapsed. He wasn't sure if he passed out or not. He looked up to see Zigzag's wild head staring down at him. "I ain't digging that dirt up," Zigzag said. "That's your dirt." "Hey, Mom," Magnet called. "Caveman's been hurt." Stanley brought his fingers up to the side of his neck. He felt his wet blood and a pretty big gash just below his ear. Magnet helped Stanley to his feet, then up and out of the hole. Mr. Sir made a bandage out of a piece of his sack of the sunflower seeds and taped it over Stanley's wound. Then he told him to get back to work. "It isn't nap time." When Stanley returned to the hole, Zigzag was waiting for him. "That's your dirt," Zigzag said. "You have to dig it up. It's covering up my dirt." Stanley felt a little dizzy. He could see a small pile of dirt. It took him a moment to realize that it was the dirt which had been on his shovel when he was hit. He scooped it up. Then Zigzag dug his shovel into the ground underneath where Stanley's dirt had been. Okay, so we're seeing here a shift here. First, we see a shift in the warden. When we first met the warden and the boys had found the golden tube, she was very, almost friendly to the boys, saying to them, "Oh, take your time, do a good job, work together." But now we haven't found anything else after this golden tube. And so she's starting to get very impatient, and we're starting to see what I think are the warden's true colors, where she's very rude, and so rude and does not care about the well-being of the boys that she actually poked Armpit with the pitchfork so hard that he fell into the hole and had 3 spots on his chest where she poked him, and they were bleeding. So there's that. So now we're starting to get a little bit worried about the warden. We also see here something going on with the boys. Now Stanley seems to still be being Stanley, but here we had Zigzag. It seemed by accident, because they are shoveling in the same hole together now, was shoveling, and his shovel hit Stanley in the side of the head, and Stanley collapsed and is actually bleeding. And never once did we have Zigzag say, "Hey, I'm sorry, are you okay?" All Zigzag was worried about was that the dirt that had been in Stanley's shovel when he was about to dig fell onto the ground when Stanley fell to the ground. And Zigzag's like, "I'm not shoveling that, that's your dirt, you shovel that." So there's something else going on here too. We're kind of seeing a shift in people's personalities. Okay? Chapter 18. The next morning, Mr. Sir marched the boys to another section of the lake, and each boy dug his own hole, 5 feet deep and 5 feet wide. Stanley was glad to be away from the big hole. At least now he knew just how much he had to dig for the day, and it was a relief not to have other shovels swinging past his face, or the warden hanging around. He dug his shovel into the dirt, then slowly turned to dump it into a pile. He had to make his turn smooth and slow. If he jerked too quickly, he felt a throbbing pain just above his neck where Zigzag's shovel had hit him. That part of his head, between his neck and ear, was considerably swollen. There were no mirrors in camp, but he imagined that he looked like he had a hard-boiled egg sticking out of him. The remainder of his body hardly hurt at all. His muscles had strengthened, and his hands were tough and calloused. He was still the slowest digger, but not all that much slower than Magnet. Less than 30 minutes after Magnet returned to camp, Stanley spat into his hole. After his shower, he put his dirty clothes in his crate and got out his box of stationery. He stayed in the tent to write the letter so Squid and the other boys wouldn't make fun of him for writing to his mother. Dear Mom and Dad, camp is hard, but challenging. We've been running obstacle courses and have to swim long distances on the lake. Tomorrow we learn. He stopped writing as Zero walked into the tent, then returned to his letter. He didn't care what Zero thought. Zero was nobody. Oh. Maybe we are seeing a change in Stanley. To rock climb. I know that sounds scary, but don't worry. Zero was standing beside him now, watching him write. Stanley turned and felt his neck throb. I don't like it when you read over my shoulder, okay? Zero said nothing. I'll be careful. It's not all fun and games here, but I think I'm getting a lot out of it. It builds character. The other boys... I don't know how, said Zero. What? Can you teach me? Stanley didn't know what he was talking about. Teach you to what? To rock climb? Zero stared at him with penetrating eyes. What? Said Stanley. He was hot, tired, and sore. I want to learn to read and write, said Zero. Stanley let out a short laugh. He wasn't laughing at Zero. He was just surprised. All this time he thought Zero was reading over his shoulder. Sorry, he said. I don't know how to teach. After digging all day, he didn't have the strength to try to teach Zero to read and write. He needed to save his energy for the people who counted. You don't have to teach me to write, said Zero, just to read. I don't have anybody to write to. Sorry, Stanley said again. His muscles and hands weren't the only parts of his body that had toughened over the past several weeks. His heart had hardened as well. He finished his letter. He barely had enough moisture in his mouth to seal and stamp the envelope. It seemed that no matter how much water he drank, he was always thirsty. So we've learned a few things in this chapter. We learned that Stanley is also changing. That the character that digging holes builds might not be the kind of character we actually want to develop. It's a hardened character. It's a person who thinks of other people as nothing, that doesn't help somebody when they ask to learn to read and write. That's not the type of character that we want to be as a human being. The type of character we want to develop is being a person that helps others, that understands that no matter what we're going through, other people have it worse. So yeah, Stanley is out there and he's having to dig holes in the sun. So are all the other boys. Yeah, Stanley gets hit in the head with a shovel and it hurts. Yeah, it's not good. But Zero, we're learning that Zero really does have a lot of things in his life that are zero. He doesn't have anybody to write to. Zero. He doesn't know how to read. Zero. He doesn't know how to write. Zero. He didn't know a nursery rhyme. Zero. I feel like Zero has been given zero chance to succeed at life. And when he asked for a chance to succeed, Stanley turned him down. It's something that authors do in books when they're writing, is they take a character that we like, we feel for, so Stanley, and all of a sudden we see things within that character that are concerning, that maybe we also see in ourselves at times when we think things are going rough for us or bad, so we treat others unkindly as well. We don't have the energy to give to others. And that's true. Sometimes we don't have the energy to give to others. But we should never be unkind. And we should never think of other people as being a nothing, a zero, ever. All right, guys, that's it for this chapter. See you next time.